was the center of attention, telling stories that made everyone laugh. I was mesmerized by his confidence. That's how it all started. Now, 3 years later, I'm sitting here in our small living room, 7 months pregnant, wondering where that charming man disappeared to. Daisy, did you see my blue shirt? Mark's voice breaks my train of thought. It's in the closet, where it always is, I reply, trying to get comfortable on the couch. He walks into the room, fumbling with his tie. I can't find it. Are you sure you didn't put it somewhere else? I sigh, slowly standing up. I'll get it for you. As I hand him the shirt, he gives me a quick, distracted smile. Thanks, Daisy. I don't know what I'd do without you. There's a hint of the old Mark in that smile, but it fades quickly. He's always been a bit forgetful, a bit dependent, but since we got married, it's like he's a different person. He expects me to remember everything, to take care of everything, just like his mom did for him. His mother, Mrs. Thompson, calls almost every day. She's nice enough, but her constant checking in can be a bit much. Daisy, dear, did you make sure Mark ate breakfast? You know how he gets when he's hungry, she would say. I used to find it endearing in a way, but now it's just another reminder of how much Mark relies on others. Mark is getting ready to leave for work, and I'm dreading another long day alone in the house. The baby kicks, and I place my hand on my belly, trying to find some comfort. Mark, do you think you could come home early today? I'm feeling a bit off, I say, hoping for some company. He glances at his watch, already halfway out the door. Sorry, Daisy. Big day at the office. You know how it is. Just rest up, okay? And with that, he's gone. I sit back down, feeling the weight of loneliness. I wonder if this is how it's going to be from now on. Me, at home, waiting for Mark to find his way back to the man he used to be. I look around the room, at the life we've built, and can't help but feel like it's all just a charming illusion. The sun wasn't even fully up yet, and I could already hear the familiar ring of the phone. I knew who it was without even looking. Morning, Daisy dear. Just checking in. Did Mark have his breakfast? And what about lunch? You know he doesn't like sandwiches. Mrs. Thompson's voice chirped through the receiver. I rubbed my temples, feeling the start of a headache. Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. Yes, he had breakfast, and I've packed him pasta for lunch. He won't go hungry. Oh, pasta again? You know, I always made sure he had a hot meal for lunch. Maybe you should try doing that. He loves my chicken casserole, she replied, her tone slightly critical. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll keep that in mind. After the call, I made my way to the kitchen, feeling the baby kick. I leaned against the counter, thinking about how Mrs. Thompson always had a way of making me feel inadequate. I wasn't just competing with Mark's memories of her cooking, but with her constant presence in our life. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Mrs. Thompson herself, standing there with a bag of groceries. Daisy, I brought you some things. I noticed you're running low on a few essentials, she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. I followed her, trying to mask my frustration. Thank you, but you really didn't need to. I don't mind, dear. And I noticed the house could use a bit of tidying up. You should be more careful, especially with the baby coming, she said, looking around with a critical eye. I felt a surge of anger. I'm doing my best, Mrs. Thompson. It's not easy being pregnant and managing the house all by myself. She clucked her tongue, unpacking the groceries. Well, when Mark was a child, I did everything without any help. It's all about managing your time better, dear. The rest of her visit went in a blur of unsolicited advice and thinly veiled criticisms. By the time she left, I was exhausted and more than a little resentful. Sitting alone in the now silent kitchen, I couldn't help but feel overshadowed by this woman who still held such a firm grip on her son. It was like I was living in a shadow, always trying to live up to an impossible standard. I knew something had to change, but right now, I felt too tired to even think about how to start. All I could do was sit there, feeling the weight of a mother's shadow over my life. As I maneuvered through the crowded aisles of the grocery store, each step felt heavier than the last. My back ached and my feet were swollen. I was halfway through my list when I realized I had forgotten bread. Turning back, I maneuvered past a sea of shopping carts, feeling a bit overwhelmed. Daisy, need a hand? It was Jim, Mark's dad, waving from the end of the aisle. His presence was like a breath of fresh air. I smiled, genuinely relieved. Jim, you're a lifesaver. I almost forgot the bread. We walked together, chatting about this and that. Jim had a way of making even mundane conversations feel comforting. As we reached the bread section, he joked, "Make sure it's whole grain. We've got to keep Mark away from that white bread fluff." I laughed, appreciating his lightheartedness. "I'll try, but you know how he is with his food preferences." Jim nodded, his expression turning a bit more serious. "Yeah, I do. He's always been a bit picky. Got that from his mother, I suppose." We moved towards the checkout, and I felt a sense of ease that was rare these days. Jim's presence was calming, a stark contrast to the constant tension I felt at home. "You know, Daisy," Jim began, as he helped me unload my cart. "I've been thinking, maybe Mark and his mom are a bit hard on you. You're doing everything while carrying a little one. It's not fair." I was taken aback by his frankness. I try to keep up, but it's hard, Jim. I feel like I'm always falling short of their expectations." Jim frowned. "You're doing more than enough. Don't let them tell you otherwise. You're carrying my grandchild, for heaven's sake." His words were like a balm to my weary soul. We finished checking out, and he insisted on helping me to the car. As he lifted a bag, he winced, his hand going to his lower back. "Jim, you're back," I began, concerned. He shrugged it off with a grin. "Ah, it acts up now and then. Nothing to worry about." But I could tell he was in pain. It pained me to see him strain himself for my sake. "You shouldn't be doing this, Jim. I can manage." He waved my concerns away. "Nonsense. Helping you is the least I can do. Besides, it keeps me active." We reached my car, and he carefully placed the bags in the trunk. "You head on home and rest. I'll have a talk with Mark and his mom. Things need to change." I thanked him, feeling a mix of gratitude and guilt. It was clear that Jim understood the dynamics at home better than anyone. As I drove away, I realized that without Jim, I would be truly alone in this struggle. His support meant the world to me, especially now. Back home, I put away the groceries, each item reminding me of Jim's kindness. His words echoed in my mind, giving me a sliver of hope. Perhaps, with his help, things could get better. Maybe, just maybe, Mark and his mother would start to see things from my perspective. But as the day wore on, and the house returned to its usual quiet, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Change was necessary, but it wouldn't come easy. I braced myself for the conversation that Jim would undoubtedly have with Mark and Mrs. Thompson. Whatever the outcome, I knew one thing for sure. Jim was my only ally in this, and I was grateful for him. The clock on the kitchen wall showed it was past midnight. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creaking of the floorboards. Mark wasn't home yet. His late nights were becoming more frequent, but tonight felt different. I tried to distract myself by tidying up, but my mind was racing. The sound of a car pulling up jolted me from my thoughts. I peeked through the window and saw Mark stumbling out of the car, clearly drunk. My heart sank. He fumbled with his keys at the door, cursing under his breath. When he finally managed to get inside, he looked at me with glazed eyes. "Mark, you're drunk," I said, my voice a mix of worry and frustration. He sneered. "Oh, now you're my mother? Keep your lectures to yourself, Daisy." I felt a knot in my stomach. "You promised you'd stop this. You know it's not good, especially now." He cut me off, his voice slurred but harsh. "Stop nagging me. I needed a break, okay? You don't know what it's like at work." I tried to reason with him. "But what about us, Mark? What about the baby?" He laughed, a cold, bitter sound. The baby. Is that all you can talk about? You used to be fun, Daisy. Now you're just boring." His words stung. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "And look at you. You've become a fat cow. What happened to the woman I married?" He jeered. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They streamed down my face as I turned away from him. Mark staggered to the bedroom, leaving me standing there, broken and alone. I cried myself to sleep on the couch that night. The next morning, I woke up to find Mark had already left for work. My